Today we're going to learn about market failure. In the previous lectures, we have seen how different economic systems perform and reallocate and allocate their resources. But what happens when a particular economic system fails to allocate their resources in the most efficient manner? In this regard, we say that market failure occurs when the market system fails to achieve efficiency. Well, market failure can occur in a lot of different circumstances and in a lot of different ways, but primarily we're going to look in depth essentially these three market failures. The first one is externalities, where there is underproduction of merit goods and overproduction of demerit goods. These will be studied in very detailed explanations in A2, but for now you need to know what are merit goods and demerit goods. And secondly, how there's no production of public goods and exactly what public goods are. And thirdly, information failure and the different types and examples of information failure that consists mainly of moral hazards and adverse selection. So what are merit goods? To keep it simple, merit goods are simply those goods, the consumption of which actually benefits not only yourself but also others around you. For instance, if you think about healthcare, well, if you purchase healthcare and if you take that service, it not only benefits you, but it also benefits the company that you're working for, because now you can go to that company and deliver if you're healthy. If you're unhealthy and you take sick days, then it's bad for the company as well, right? So healthcare is actually helping not only you, but also everyone around you. Same goes for products and services like education, shelter, etc. But what about demerit goods? Well, demerit goods are the exact opposite. They are goods that not only harm you or cost you something, but they also cost the society and the external people and the third parties something as well. For instance, if you talk about consuming tobacco, it not only harms the person who's consuming tobacco, but also the others around him, right? Because of passive consumption of tobacco. And there are so many examples of demerit goods. And if you think about it, these are the sorts of goods that not only harm or cost the person who's consuming them, but also everyone around them. That's why they're called demerit goods. And usually in the market economy, what happens is that the merit goods are very undermined and they are usually very underproduced. And demerit goods are actually overestimated and they're actually overproduced. And that is exactly when the allocation of resources in the market economy actually fails. But essentially that brings us to the problem of what we say is paternalism, where we actually assume that the society is actually the best actor for itself and that it can think and make value judgments for whatever is best for them. That's why we cannot completely bar the consumption of demerit goods or tell them to consume more of merit goods by force, because society knows best and they can act on their own value judgments. Now, what exactly are these value judgments and why is value judgments important in economics? Well, in economics, we are very interested to know both about positive statements and normative statements. And normative statements essentially are all the statements that are made from value judgments. Value judgments essentially means the opinions that you have, the personal perspective to a situation or a scenario that you have. It is extremely subjective, it is extremely personal, and it involves more or less an opinion of someone. It's not something that's consolidated or proven, rather it is something that a person have an opinion upon. If I give you an example, for instance, a lot of people do not like to consume meat, and that is their own opinion. A lot of people say that meat is something that is bad for you, and that's why they don't consume it. And that is probably why that statement can be a normative statement. And of course, in economics, you will never find the perfect way of allocating resources. And that is why normative statements and value judgments in general is so important in economics, because it tells you the different perspectives and different opinions of different economists and different views of how we study the allocation of resources. But then again, what if you could prove some of those value judgments by providing, for example, facts or proofs or statements, right? Then that becomes a positive statement. It's something that is either universally true or something that can be proven true or something that is a fact. For instance, you can say that some part of meat is bad for you. It can cause obesity. It can make you gain a lot of weight, which is why it is bad for you, right? So in that perspective, it can be a positive statement, which means that it has the ability to be proven, or it has the ability to be backed by facts. And that is where positive statements comes in. Now let's go back to market failure. The second market failure that we were studying is that there is actually no production of public goods. And why is that? Well, public goods are goods that has two properties. One of them is non-rivalry, and the other is non-excludable. What do these essentially mean? Well, non-rivalry basically means that when one person consumes it, it doesn't disallow the second person to consume it as well. Think about a road. If one person is traveling with their car on that road, it doesn't actually leave another person behind, right? That person can also travel on that road. And that is why roads in general, or infrastructure in general, has the property of non-rivalry. But just think of a burger. If one person eats a burger, then it excludes the other person from eating that burger, right? Which means that that one burger has 100 hungry people waiting to eat that, which means that burger has a lot of rivals, right? A lot of other people who could have eaten that burger if one person didn't eat that burger, which means that that particular burger is not a public good because it has rivals. It has the property of a rivalry. And what is non-excludable? Well, non-excludable means that if one person starts using it, then you cannot disallow other people from using it as well by, for instance, barring them or putting some sort of license, or by putting some sort of price. You cannot ration that product and you cannot exclude them from using it, right? So for instance, if someone is walking on a road, you cannot simply tell them that don't walk on this road, it's my road, you have to pay for it. You can't, right? Everyone can use a road, and that is why a road is a public good. And the problem with market systems or market economy is that you cannot make profit on public goods simply because of these two properties. Because you cannot exclude anyone from using it, and because if someone uses it, other people does not get excluded from using it, it means that you simply cannot put a price tag and make a profit margin out of it. And that is why, because the profit motive is not satisfied for the market economy, they do not produce public goods. But as you could understand by the examples, public goods are so very important, and that is why we call this a market failure. The third market failure is information failure. Now, it's important to understand that no individual has the capacity to have all the information in the world, which means that when there is an exchange or a transaction between two individuals, there's always going to be one individual who's less knowledgeable or has less information about that transaction than the other one. For instance, when you go to a doctor, what happens? The doctor actually knows more about the diseases that you might have. He listens to your symptoms, he listens to what you're saying, and then he prescribes you a medicine. And for instance, you go to the doctor, and the doctor gives you medicine and hears you out, right? He hears your symptoms, he hears what your problem is, and he gives you the medicine. But imagine after he gives you the medicine and you keep, for instance, taking those medicine you stop doing all other things that you used to do before to keep yourself healthy. You stop exercising, you stop uh, eating healthy, you stop sleeping healthy, etc., etc., because you think that since the doctor told you to have this medicine, it's going to cure everything. And that is exactly the problem of moral hazard. When there is a lack of information between two individuals performing a transaction, and after that transaction, there's a risk of inefficiency because you listen to that information and you cannot properly understand the risk of that information. And adverse selection actually happens much before that transaction. So adverse selection is basically, for instance, it's easier to explain with an example. You go to buy something from an electronic store and you tell them to give you this device, right? And of course, the seller has more information about the device because they have studied more about it. So what they are going to do to you is they're going to tell you that this device is going to last you for 10 years. But in reality, it's going to last you 2 years, but you do not know that. So you agree to pay them a large amount of money by giving them a huge amount of money for that product, which you think is going to last 10 years because they told you so. And since they have more information, you have to believe them, which means they exploited that information gap, that information failure, and made you pay more for that device than you should have, right? And this is exactly the problem of adverse selection.